think most people first start writing, especially if you start writing young, right? It's not great, right? But I heard someone talking about like bad ideas. They would go, oh, let me tell you my bad idea. And it's like, the reason I would always do that is because, that first idea tends to be bad, but that'll lead to good ideas. And I think writing is kind of that same way, right? Like, this is my bad writing. You don't have to share it with anyone, but here's my bad writing, but that's going to lead me to what the good writing is. So hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour, the show where writing comes in all shapes and sizes, but the stories and the booze are always large. I am your host, William R. Hincy, and I am really honored and delighted to have author Sandra Arnold with me. Sandra, welcome to the bar.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah. So happy we could do this. So, and I want to give you, I used to call it the Cliff Notes version, and then I decided everything needed to be like whiskey themed, booze themed. So I'm going to call it the Whiskey Notes version of an introduction here, and feel free to add anything you like. But I know you write novels, short stories, micros, fiction of all shapes and sizes. Novels include The Bones of the Story, Where the Wind Blows, and The Distraction of Opposites, among others. You've been nominated, shortlisted, and won too many awards to count. And some of the cool, notable writing things, and I did notice you co-founded and I'm going to butcher the name because I never wrote. I always make sure to get the name pronunciation of the person, but I always forget all the other stuff I'm going to mispronounce. So it's just a long list of them now. But the Takahe Literary Journal.
Takahe.
Okay, I was almost there. Takahe Literary Journal. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, that's fine. That sounds good.
Okay, very good. So, and what I like to do to start, because I know it's morning where you're at, so it's probably I guess it's early enough for a screwdriver or a Bloody Mary. But what I like to know is where you are in the world and kind of where is the best place to get a drink there?
To get an alcoholic drink, you mean?
Whatever kind of drink you want to take us to.
Well, I live in the South Island of New Zealand. In Canterbury. I live out in the country in a very, very small village called Greendale. And we are 10 kilometers from the nearest town. And it's a very small town, farming town. And there are 2 pubs there and 2 lovely cafes. I don't go to the pubs because I don't drink, but I do go to the cafes, which make the very best coffee in the world.
Very good. I like both. I like the coffee in the morning and then the booze at night. So it sounds I would go to those cafes and I would go to those pubs. So bless you. Awesome. So then maybe we can, kind of start here. What I like to get a sense for is just kind of your journey as a writer, like kind of where you started, kind of, and through life, more generally, kind of leading up till today.
I think I've always been interested these. And I think it probably started with my father was a great storyteller, and he used to read to me, buy me books. And then as I got older, I wanted more adventurous stories. So I gave him the title and theme of the story I'd like him to make up for me. And he'd go off to work and think about it, and then come back that night and tell me the story. So we did that actually for a long time. And then I started writing poems when I was around 11 and put together, decorated a book of poetry, which is probably absolutely excruciatingly awful. But I did that. I always wanted to put words down. And also wrote a few short stories. Did that right through my teens. And when I was a college student, again, they weren't good, but it doesn't matter. They were never meant for publication. They were for me writing something.
Sure.
And then I got married, and we moved to New York State for a couple of years from England, because I was originally from England. And we moved to New York State, and my daughter was born there. So I wasn't teaching anything. And so then I thought, right, now is the time really to take a writing course and actually begin to write. So I did some kind of correspondence writing course for children. But then I thought, actually, I'm not that interested in writing for children. So I gave up on that one. And then we went back to England for a few years. And then we moved to New Zealand. And when we were in New Zealand, that's really when I thought I, really got to start writing here. And I joined, there was a really nice group in Christchurch called, it's in New Zealand, the New Zealand Society of Authors. And there was a lovely group in Christchurch that was part of that. So I joined that, met other writers, talked to them, and then started writing my own stories. And I wrote for radio. So for quite a lot of years, just wrote radio stories. And then I started writing stories for publication in magazines. And I think it would be about probably let me just check dates, I think. It was, my first novel was called A Distraction of Opposites. And I wrote that in 1992. That was 92. That was published in New Zealand. I've just got the dates down here because I can't on my head. And then what actually happened was in 2000, a daughter who was only 22 at the time was diagnosed with cancer of the appendix. She died a year later. And for a whole year afterwards, I couldn't read stories, I couldn't write anything. I was just completely without words, completely bereft, had no means of expressing what I felt. It was just so traumatic. And then I thought, I do what I always do. To make sense of something, I write about it. So I started writing about the whole situation. And then I thought, in order to keep me on track, what I'll do is do some research on the whole topic of parental bereavement, and found there was absolutely nothing on grieving the death of a young adult child through cancer. There was enough on children, older people, but not that age group. So I enrolled in a PhD, and I did the research for the PhD on that. And that just kept me on track. And then when that was finished, part of my thesis was published by Canterbury University Press in a book called Sing No Sad Songs. So that kept me going for actually quite a long time. And then I think in 2014, I was awarded a writing residency. And I resigned from teaching, and I started work on a novel which was called The Ash, the Well and the Bluebell. And that was published in New Zealand in 2019. And at the same time, I was writing a flash fiction collection. And I think that's quite interesting about the flash fiction, because I didn't write flash fiction. I never heard of it until about 2016. I wrote short stories, essays, novels, nonfiction. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a poet, Jim Norcliffe, and he said he'd just become editor of a flash fiction magazine, which was an online magazine started in Christchurch by an American woman called Michelle Elvey. And when I got to know her, she told me that flash fiction was quite popular in America, but at that particular time, there really wasn't anything in New Zealand. And she started this magazine. So I remember saying to my friend, Jim, well, I couldn't see really how a story could be conveyed in just a few words, because he said the word limit for flash fiction for that particular magazine, Flash Frontier, was 250. I said, how on earth can you, in 250 words, what about the character development, the background, and so on? And he said, well, rather than explain it, go and read it, have a look at them, have a look at the stories. And I did, and I was absolutely blown away by them. The beauty of the stories, the concise, concentrated stories, and the beauty of the language. What I did realize was that flash fiction can be very close to prose poetry in terms of the language, and that nothing much is conveyed. Most of it is conveyed in the reader's imagination. The difference really between flash fiction and prose poetry is that flash fiction has a narrative arc. Poetry doesn't. Mm-hmm. But very, very, similar in many ways. So I really love the stories, and I thought, right, I'll see if I can write some. So I did. I started writing flash fiction, got some of those published in various magazines. And then, so what I was saying earlier, in 2014, I was awarded a writing residency, and I wrote The Ash, the Well, and the Bluebell. That was a novel published in New Zealand in 2019. And at that time, I started writing a flash fiction collection called Soul Etchings, which was published in England in the same year, 2019. And then carried on, actually. I just really liked the flash fiction. And I also wrote some short stories called Where the Wind Blows, and that was published in Australia. And then a novella in flash that was published about the same time. And then I wrote On the Bones of the Story. That was published, that's just a novella in flash with 12 short stories in it. And then in 2023, that was book published in Australia. And then last year, Below Ground, which was the third flash fiction book in England. So that brings me up to date now. And what I'm busy doing now is working on another collection of flash fiction, with occasionally taking side roads off to write a short story, because sometimes I might start with a flash fiction story of, say, either 100 words or 1,000 words. Sometimes I think there's more to be said here. So then that becomes a short story. So I've got some short stories developing, and then this flash fiction collection as well, which I haven't got a title for yet. I'm about halfway through it. So that's pretty much up to date with what I do.
Quickly quack. Bing. Oh, hello. You caught me right as I was putting the finishing touches on my epic absurdist satire, Pirates of Appalachia. And now it is time for the long road to publication and the long editing process. You know, as writers, we spend tons of time editing our work. The hardest part, I think, of the editing process is really like the proofreading, the copy editing, because you were so immersed in it. I've just spent 13 years immersed in Pirates, got it all together, went through, edited it front and back by characters, all these different asymmetrical ways. And still, it's going to have typos in it. And they're going to horrify me one day if I ever find those in the actual printed edition. The way I combat that is with Edit GPT. You found today's sponsor. The link is on the screen now. I'm going to put it here. Here's the link. If you're on the podcast forum and you can't see me pointing up at that link, if you're on a podcast, you're really missing out. I'm really animated with my hands. But if you can't find it on there, feel free. You'll find it in the description. It helps support the show. It helps restock the bar. Helps keep this guy happy so that we can keep putting all these shows out there for all of you. Thanks for everything. Let's get back to the writing, because Pirates of Appalachia is not going to finish itself. The one thing Edit GPT cannot do is save the file for you. So I'm going to make sure to save that now. So I want to get back to my work. You get back to your regularly scheduled programming. Right. Well, thank you for that. You know, it was really, it reminded me when you're talking about your dad, is that I used to do that with the kids. And what was cool, so I would, I'd make up stories and we would go and they'd kind of give me ideas. But I think it's really neat that also you started to go, here, I want this theme, or I want this, this kind of genre, or this, motif to it. And then he would go think it up. So that's a really, really lovely story. And it's funny too, because there's, like you had mentioned, right? Like when you first, I think most people first start writing, especially if you start writing young, right? It's not great, right? But I heard someone talking about like bad ideas. They would go, oh, let me tell you my bad idea. And it's like, the reason I would always do that is because, that first idea tends to be bad, but that'll lead to good ideas. And I think writing is kind of that same way, right? Like, this is my bad writing. You don't have to share it with anyone, but here's my bad writing, but that's going to lead me to what the good writing is. So it's a natural progress of it. I think it's good you went through that. But thank you for all that. And I know it's been years, but condolences on your loss. I know it's never easy. So thank you for sharing that. What took you? So the route, right? So you were born in England, I think, right? You started in England, then you were in New York, and then to New Zealand. What was I guess I'm a little more interested in what took you to New Zealand, since that's where you're at now. Like, how did that New York to New Zealand, process go?
Well, I think when we were in England, what happened there? My husband was doing a master's degree. And then we just decided to have an adventure when that was finished. We'd go somewhere else, go to America. So we were living in a little town, well, not that small, a town called Schenectady, in New York State. And we were there for about 2.5 years. And then at the end of that time, he decided to do a PhD. So we went back to England. And I was quite happy living in England because I love the history, the old buildings and so on. Families there. But one of his colleagues was offered a professorship at Canterbury University in New Zealand. And he was persuaded my husband to go there and work as a lecturer. And I said, well, no, I'm not all that keen. It's on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But my husband persuaded me and said, well, we just go for an adventure,
Sure.
Maybe go 4 years or something. And at the end of that time, he would have a sabbatical leave, go back to England, and then we can make a decision. So in New Zealand, I just felt in New Zealand, we settled very quickly. It's a beautiful country. There are towns, obviously, more particularly in the North Island, but where we live, it's so quiet. And I suppose as the years went on, I realized I don't like noise. I don't like traffic. I absolutely do not like cities. And we did live in Christchurch for a while, which is a small city. But then, who rode horses, she was very keen on having her own horse. Well, we didn't have enough space in town to have a horse. Shortly after that, we went to Brazil. We lived there for a year. And in Brazil, we had a friend there who had a farm with horses. My daughter rode horses there every day. And then when we came back to New Zealand, she nagged about living in the countryside so that she could have a horse. So that's why we moved out to this place and got her horse. So that was really the reason she could ride horses, because where we are, it's so quiet, really quiet country roads, a river, and very, very little traffic. So we did. And I thought, oh, well, we'll stay here for a few years maybe. And we're still here. We lived in Oman in the Middle East for a year as well. We went there. Again, it was my husband's work. But always glad to come back here. And then last year, we went back to England for my college reunion to visit my friends there that I'd gone to college with, and also to stay with my brother and his family who lives there. And I really liked it. I think if you are born and you grow up in a place, you always have a connection to that place. And then we came back to New Zealand, and I realized we've also got the connection here. It's a connection there and a connection here. So I think we'll stay here until we die, probably.
Sure. That's funny. Thanks for sharing that. I like the idea, right, of connection to it, because so I was born in West Virginia, in Morgantown, West Virginia, and we moved across. But I have no memories of West Virginia. I was born and we were out very soon thereafter, and then we moved around a bit, and then we ended up in California here when I think it was about 4. We moved around to here a little, but I've always joked that I don't really feel like a connection anywhere. But I don't feel I feel like a cousin everywhere, right? It's like, oh, you invite your cousin over, and it's like, oh yeah, you're always invited to come, but no one expects you to stay around and clean up. That's how I kind of feel with different, because I'm Italian, I'm Irish, I've got all these different things. I'm like, I don't really feel like one thing, but I'm like, I'm kind of all part of it, but no one really expects me to have to do any of the heavy lifting. But when we went back to West Virginia, We've gone back several times now. My family, my extended family is like Western Pennsylvania, and there's the Panhandle, West Virginia that goes up. And so some of them are kind of been there. But so the last few times we've made a point to really spend some time there and kind of go around and go to Morgantown where I was born. And so we've gotten a chance to spend some time there. And so now it's like it's weird because I'm like maybe just knowing that I was born there or something. There's a certain feeling to it. So, but it also doesn't, I think I'll probably end up, dying here. So, like, my wife passed away. Yeah. Well, so thanks for that. So I wondered then, like, when you went through, so you go through the loss of your daughter and you get a PhD, which is, I'm grieving, like it was basically like an adult child. That was the crux of it. Because there wasn't much, which that's just an amazing like feat of itself, right? Just to be able to take that loss and go, okay, I'm going to get a PhD and I'm going to study this and really kind of offer something that's not out there. What did that teach you about it? Like, what did you kind of learn in the process of getting that PhD about that level of loss for one, but then also, well, so when you're saying you were so like the area of study for it, right? So like, what did you discover about yourself? What did you discover kind of about about just the situation in general?
I think I always write about something that I don't understand, and that makes it clearer. And I think it's the same with fiction. If I start writing a story, I need to make sense of it, and it might not necessarily be something I've experienced, or it could be maybe a little trigger of a memory. And somehow I need to write about it to make it clear. And it's possibly because I find writing easier than talking. Although you might not believe it because I'm yak on the show.
Yeah, no, I actually feel the same way too. It's like I yak on this show all of the time. But what I actually find, and so people like tend to not like realize this, is that I do write some satires and things, but I write a lot of very like serious, things, even dark at times or just really like really emotional. And I think that's because that's where I put all of that. I have a harder time talking about that. I can, but I to really get to that emotional part, I feel a lot better trying to make sense of it through a fictional story than through being like talking. And then so then when I talk, I mostly just kind of am able to joke around and kind of keep things light. Yeah. But that's where all the others, the trauma and the darkness goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think the biggest risk is you've ever taken?
You mean in terms of writing? Or
anything? Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
Biggest risk? Oh, maybe agreeing to go in a hot air balloon.
Very good. How did it turn out? How did you like the hot air balloon?
I was working in a language school teaching English as a foreign language. And one of the owners started the first hot air balloon in, I think, maybe in the South Island in Christchurch. He's very, very keen on it. And he wanted all the teachers in the school to go in this hot air balloon and for free. And they were all very excited. Thought, wow, because, it costs a lot of money normally to pay to go in a hot air balloon. I wasn't keen at all because actually I'm not keen on risk-taking at all. And then there's, it's so safe, It's very safe. There are more risks than crossing the road. You'll be fine. All of this sort of thing. And I thought, oh, well, okay, I'll go in and, at least I'll say I've done it. And my son, who was, I think, probably something like 18 or 19 at the time, he was very keen on going in with me. So we did. And at the crack of dawn, this hot air balloon was there. And we climbed in. Very, very nervous. Not a good idea. Why didn't I listen to my gut instinct? Everyone else seemed to be really excited, and the balloon went up into the air. And then we could look down and we saw all the sheep in the fields. And then we saw the sunrise over the horizon. And so my fear disappeared because everything looked so beautiful. And I thought, oh, this is a good thing. And the balloon floated like a bubble on air. It was just lovely. I thought, oh, this is amazing. What an experience. But then what happens in Canterbury is the wind, very unexpected, very strong with no warning. And this very strong northwest wind blew up, and it blew the balloon off track. It wasn't where the pilot was intending to take it. And not only blowing it off track, but very, very fast. And it went over the hills towards a lake. And we could see the lake was there. And the pilot was trying to get the balloon to go down. He couldn't because the wind was gusting it up into the air. And I was probably more worried because of my son. So I was hanging on to him.
Sure.
And I thought, well, we're all going to die here. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And then the balloon crashed on the ground, crashed on its side, and then it went through a field of barbed wire. There was barbed wire fence, a field full of cows who were very surprised at this balloon charging.
Sure. Right.
And, barbed wire hanging off the end of the balloon and charging like an express train towards the lake. And then finally it stopped. Unbelievably, it stopped just before the lake. And then we all climbed out, rather battered and bruised. And I thought, it's so funny because of how you react. Some people are just absolutely struck dumb, absolutely silent. One woman said, oh no, I've lost my hat. Which is a really weird thing to say when you've been in this horrible accident. I lost my hat. And some people, look battered and bruised. Anyway, we climbed out and wandered around as if we were drunk, around the balloon. And then 3 duck shooters came over a hill holding their little cans of beer and their guns and looked at us in absolute astonishment because they'd seen this happen, the balloon crash, and they expected to find some battered corpses. And they were actually very relieved when they saw. And they just said, they looked at us and said, good day. Fabulous New Zealand understatement. And then we took everybody, what did we do? Oh, yes, there was a van following us, that was tracking the balloon. They took everybody to hospital for a checkup. One man had broken an arm in all of this because we'd all crashed down on top of him as the balloon was going up and down. And that was just terrible, absolutely terrible. And the owner of the balloon seemed to think it was funny. So we all went back to school on the Monday looking all black eyes, black and blue. And the students saw that and they said, what happened to all the teachers? Yeah. And one of the teachers with a strange sense of humor said, we all went to the pub and we got into a fight.
Very good.
The owner of the balloon just thought it was funny. So that's really odd. That doesn't usually happen, but never mind. We'll have another.
You guys crash landed in a hot air balloon. That's really funny.
Next week.
Yeah. Oh, that is hilarious. Getting back to it then. So, and that was one of the best stories we've ever had from me asking that question. I was not expecting a hot air balloon would be a crash story. That's
Well, again, you see, because it was so awful, so traumatic, and the owner was saying, we'll go back next week. We'll try it again. You will see how lovely it really is. I said, no way. Amazingly, one person did. And she said when she went back, it was fine. It was quiet. Nothing happened. Sure. But me, I was traumatized. And so what did I do? I wrote about it. I wrote a story about it. So that's how you get it out of your system. It stops haunting you at that point.
Hey, everybody. Exciting news. I wanted to break right here and now for you. My epic absurdist satire, Pirates of Appalachia, is now going to be available as a weekly serial on Substack. So if you want to go over, it is truly epic, and it will now be releasing weekly on Substack. You'll get one chapter every week. It's 2 books long, so we're going to have a nice journey together. If you want to get the entire story sooner, if you like an e-reader, you like a paperback, you like a physical copy, audiobook, I will have links all on the Substack. I'll include them on this video as well when they're ready, but you'll be able to get that book, both books sooner and read well ahead. And if not, if you don't have the money or you want to check it out first, you can just go to Substack, check it out, and get the whole thing on there for free. I am going to have a paid subscription service on there as well, so you can get all my crazy notes that I leave for my editor. Sometimes I leave for like future me to read and maybe get a chuckle out of or just judge past me. It's a weird relationship we have, but that'll all be on there. I'll be doing a bunch of other fun stuff. I'll be doing readings, so I'll have links on there for a lot of the chapters and other fun stuff I have in mind, but I haven't been able to actualize yet. So I'm not gonna false advertise. I wanna be authentic with you. So that is what I am committed to, but there is going to be a lot more. So check it out. Pirates is truly this is satire in the primal sense. Teeth bared. This is not trying to meet some corporate entity's sanitized version. This is satire that is just pointing out the foibles of society in a way that in a kind of a fantasy quasi future. So it takes us a step away from where we are. It's recognizable, but you can get to have a lot of fun with it. There's no tribes to join, although it does mock tribalism quite a bit. Essentially, it holds a funhouse mirror up to the burning embers of society, and we laugh and we grieve together, and there is so much to it that I can't all explain in kind of a minute-long little interlude here for you. But you want to check it out, the link will be in the description. It'll be on the pinned comment. I would love to have you along. Give me comments and things. It's going to be a wild ride. Thanks so much, and let's get back to your regularly scheduled programming. And I think we've kind of covered the why you write, right? As we've talked through. One of the questions, and I had on fantasy writer Ken Liu, and he actually was like, oh, let me turn this around on you. And actually, I liked the question and him turning it around. So now I turn it around to like everyone that comes on the show. Well, not everyone, but select few. So what are you great at as a writer? And we always talk about like, oh, here's craft tips, this or that, writing process. But what do you think what is something you're great at as a writer?
I think probably maybe not a straightforward answer, because when I write, usually when I get ideas for writing, it might be something very simple, like sitting in a cafe having a cup of coffee, and then overhearing part of the conversation, looking at the expression on someone's face and then I'm thinking, she looks really unhappy and she's telling this person what the problem is. But of course, I don't know what the problem is because I can't necessarily hear everything that they're saying. But it gets into my head somehow. Mm-hmm. And then I think, I'll write something and I'll make something up. So it might be a story that something real, saying someone and trying to imagine what caused that facial expression, that particular tone of voice and so on, and then writing it. And often when I do something like that, it turns out to be something quite dark. I think I do like writing the dark side rather than humor. I can do humor a bit, but I prefer writing something sinister and quite dark. So I would say that probably is the nearest answer that I can give you to that.
Sure. Thank you for that. So how do you you discussed it a little with, right, what you're thinking you're writing a micro or a flash, or there's so many different terms nowadays for it. But so you start off with, oh, this is going to be 200 words, 1,000 words, and then some of those turn into short stories. Is that kind of the process of how you get to like what the length is? Is it sometimes it's a bigger idea that becomes a novella or maybe a novel? Like is there more to it when you're kind of taking out lengths to things?
Yeah, sometimes it's just I'll start writing and the writing or the story has maybe been told in a very short space, but sometimes it might be, well, there's more to it than that. Maybe you need to introduce some more characters. That needs to have a little bit more explanation. So it's really, I don't make a decision, now I'm going to write a 1,000-word story or a 2,000-word story. It's what happens during the process, that it can all be told in a way that doesn't need any more explanation, or maybe it does, and so the story might develop from there. So it really just comes from the writing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Sure. It's interesting you say that, because there was the novel I'm working on now. It started off as a short story in this little, I'm such a great marketer. I have my little short story collection, if I can get my finger over it, at this tiny little little place behind me. But the anthology there's a short story called Teeth that started off as a very long short story, like a 12,000 kind of word short story. That was kind of the bad idea, going back to the bad writing, bad idea. I distilled that down once I had some time away from it to like 1,000 words. So it's a really short, just kind of hard hitting, short story. And now that, all these years later, because I think that's published 2005, 2010, somewhere kind of between those years. And then, something kind of hit me one night where I was like, oh, no, there's more to that story. I have a whole novel that I want to write and all these other characters and things to it. So I get your point where sometimes it's just I know modern writers don't like to talk about the muses, but whatever the muses might be, right? Psychologically, what are you picking up on things outside yourself, whatever it might be, but they just kind of lead you around sometimes, right? You're like, I think this is the idea. Like, oh, no, that's not the whole idea. There's more here, or maybe I can distill this down and just find your way. So I think that's lovely. So I have a very special section. I know you don't drink, but I'm going to call the section shots. So they're just rapid fire questions. Have a little fun with them, and then we'll get to reading some of your work. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, very good. No. Bless you. I can tell if you coughed or sneezed, and I'm not sure what to say for cough. So I'm just going to say bless you to all of the above. So first question here. Australia, the great down under or fake news?
Oh.
I don't know if you heard of the flat earthers. They think Australia doesn't exist. And since you're so close, I guess that means New Zealand also doesn't exist. So can you confirm that New Zealand and Australia are real places here on Where to Drink Whiskey?
Yeah, most definitely, yes.
Very good. Have you ever witnessed anything inexplicable?
Yeah, that does happen. That again often forms the basis of the story. Maybe just something that happens out in the street, because people say things like, where on earth do you get ideas for a story? Well, they're everywhere you look. And so sure. It could be something, it could be something in the street, seeing people walking down the street, just forming an opinion about their life, what's happened to lead up to this particular moment. And, you left feeling, well, we haven't got an answer for this at all. So for me, the best way is to make an answer. And that becomes the part of the imagination. So I think all writing, at least the writing that I do, often comes from seeing something and then trying to make sense of it, and then writing about it so that it has got some sense. As I mentioned about writing Sing No Sad Songs, that made sense. That was certainly a real situation, and that made sense to me as I wrote about it. But in fiction, it can be, well, for example, I'll give you one example. We have, as I've said, we live out in the country, got a big garden, and we've got some fields where we have an alpaca and some hens and some huge trees called macrocarpa trees. And one of them develops a hollow. And I thought, oh, that's how did that happen? It's obviously a very old tree. And I looked inside to see if I could see into the bottom of the hollow. And of course, I couldn't. So immediately a story appeared that there was, I might read that one out to you actually,
Okay.
that somebody became friends with a tree and the tree actually had a voice, that people did fall into this tree and all sorts of things happened to this tree. So now when I go out and look at that tree, I don't view the tree in the same way. The tree's even
sure.
septimus.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for that. I look forward to hearing it. So what is one place everyone should visit?
One place everyone should visit? Oh, I think, you mean in New Zealand?
Anywhere.
Or anywhere. Probably one of the most intriguing places I've visited was Oman in the Middle East, because the culture is so different from anything I'd ever experienced. And I was teaching academic English there to a group of students who were heading off to a university in Australia. And it was just so interesting getting to know them, a different culture. The women all came in their black abayas and so on. They were not used to talking to men, but the class was mixed. And because they were going to Australia, I told them it was really important that they did talk to them. What they did in the beginning was the women sat at the back and the men sat at the front. And I tried to get them into groups so that they could talk. And they just couldn't. And so their manager, I called him up and I said, well, look, they're never going to survive in Australia at university if they won't sit beside a male. They have to get used to this. And so my approach had been to be encouraging and gentle. Didn't work. His approach was very different. He just said, leave it to me. And I stood outside the classroom. He marched in, yelled at them in Arabic, and I could hear all this scuffling, chairs moving. And he came out and he went like this, you'll have no more trouble with that. And I went in. They were sitting in groups, so 2 women, 2 men opposite each other in a group. And they're all grinning and they said, Mrs. Sandra, we're sitting in Australia now.
Very good, very good.
It was lovely. But I enjoyed that place. I enjoyed them telling me about their lives, which was so different to anything I'd ever experienced. And the fact that it was the first generation of women to be educated, apparently, because the previous sultan had been, and the country was really backward. And their mothers, my female students, their mothers had been married off at the age of 12 and kept hidden from view. This generation of women were educated, and the reason was because there was a new sultan. The old sultan had been very old-fashioned. His son had modern ideas. So education for women became compulsory. And they were talking about that, talking about their mothers' lives, about their lives. I just found it absolutely fascinating. So I wrote a few stories, about that was set there. So I think probably that would be the most fascinating place that I've seen. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And the last one for our shots portion here. So you're trapped on a desert island. You get 1 book, 1 song, and 1 comfort food. What are you taking?
1 book, it would be probably a book by Catherine Chidgey, who was a New Zealand writer. And she wrote a wonderful book recently called Pet. And it was about a psychopathic teacher and how she dealt with students. I really loved that. It was the sort of book where you open it, you read it, you actually can't put it down until it's finished. So that would be the book. And what was the other one? The music?
A song, yep, and comfort food.
A song and what?
Comfort food? Like comfort snack. Food. Like, yeah.
Oh, comfort food. Oh, comfort food, ice cream, definitely.
Sure.
Song, probably something by the Bee Gees.
Okay, very good. Just Staying Alive. That's actually a good song you need for that desert island tonight. Staying alive. That'd be perfect. Awesome. So thanks for that. So, and then, so I know you had some flash you were going to read for us today. So if you would like, now would be a perfect time.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Brief interlude from the show to tell you about one of my books, But the Ripping Apart. But the Ripping Apart has a really interesting publication story that I'm sure I've gotten to at the show at some length. It was originally published traditionally under a different title. After a fairly horrible experience, I was able to get the rights back to it and edit it, put it out, get a new cover, everything, and really make sure it was the most complete and purest expression of the work. There's been a lot of talk recently about men's fiction. This would certainly qualify it. It's the tale of a single father in his early 30s who is trying to navigate life while dealing with his demons. The quote of the story is, some people run from their demons, others sit down and have cocktails with theirs. He is certainly a drinker, and he meets a lady who's a retired school teacher and who is kind of collapsed into hoarding and substance abuse, and he's thrust into helping her. And that conflict between the two really plays out in his family life with his parents and brothers, his work life, and with his friends, and with his budding girlfriend that he loves, but he doesn't love himself enough to really truly do it right. It really delves into all of those things. It is heartfelt. Male or female can certainly read it. If you're a guy out there and you want more depictions on the literary side that are maybe a little more slanted to the guy, the male experience, it'll certainly meet that for you as well. And there is a really cool cinematic trailer to it that retains some of the language that was cut from the original opening chapter, and which I kind of love because I get to preserve it and get to be part of the art. And I think the cinematic trailer itself is a piece of art. Let's get to it, and then you'll get back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Ms. Lyon's cancer was strewn blood-soaked across the floor, left to mutate into a labyrinth of torment, walled by festering mounds of trash and jagged memories. It was a wasteland of a lifetime of waste, unwasted, turned morbid graveyard where every tombstone read the same name. Yet somehow in the darkness there was an order to it all. Walls of trash resembled a vineyard ripe for harvest, and the stacks of books and newspapers, Grecian urns. Looking out the window, Jack could see Ms. Lyon's reflection, a skeleton with its head popping out of the grave, beaming. And Erica's reflection, a mourner at the grave, feigning happiness. Jack took a deep breath. The staleness of the air and the moldy smell in the room was becoming unbearable. And suddenly he felt the irresistible urge to bolt out of the house. Every time there was silence, it felt like the sands of death were pouring in upon him. In fact, he could taste them.
Comes from, that was the book, Below Ground. It's just been published. And this one is called The Seventh Son. That was the one about the tree. The tree in my
that's awesome. Very cool.
The Seventh Son. When my mother's new boyfriend moved in, I kept out of his way by hiding in the garden of a derelict house. The garden was full of trees, but the one I loved most was 100-year-old macrocarpa called Septimus. The lightning that killed the other 6 macrocarpas had sliced off one of Septimus's branches, leaving a gaping hole. This was enlarged over the years by birds, small animals, wind and rain, until it extended down the entire length of the trunk, ending in a deep hollow beneath the roots. When things got bad at home, I'd hide in the hollow among the bones until the boyfriend gave up looking for me. After Septimus signaled the all clear, I'd climb onto a branch and watch the swallows dive and dart while Septimus told me his stories. By the time I returned home, the boyfriend and my mother were too drunk to notice. Septimus told me about birds he'd given a home to, boys he'd flung off branches for stealing eggs, robbers who'd hidden jewels in his hollow trunk. When they returned to retrieve, they found the hollow was deeper than they realized. Some gave up, but some climbed in and slithered down to the bottom. When they tried to climb back out, they got tangled up in roots. Most people avoided walking past the garden at dusk because they said the noise of the wind in the trees didn't sound like wind in the trees. The boyfriend said only morons believed that. I told him nobody could accuse him of having an imagination. After that little confrontation, I fled to the garden. When Septimus saw my bruised eyes and bleeding nose, he drew his breath from the depths of the earth and held me close. He sang of Caribou and Tui and bellbirds and bees and moonlight and possums and the smell of rain. When his song ended, he outlined his plan. All I had to do was to sit on the fork between two branches. When the boyfriend came looking for me, he would shine his torch around the garden. He would see me sitting in the tree and yell at me to get down. He hated to be ignored. He would leap over the fence and start climbing the tree. In the shadows, he wouldn't see the hole. Septimus said he would do the rest.
Very good. I like how you mentioned you like the go dark with the stories. And it was, oh, sounds very nice. I'm like, nope, Septimus has plans. So I'm going to be a lookout for that tree.
And this one is called The Complexities of Hens. This one really started with because I love hens and I like their personalities. We have hens here. But the story is completely made up around that. The Complexities of Hens. He always set the clock 30 minutes fast so he could enjoy the luxury of having more time than the clock showed. He mended every broken thing in the house with black tape. He welded iron bars onto saucepans whose handles had come off and reminded his 4 daughters to fill the pans to the brim before they put them on the stove to stop them overbalancing. He trimmed their hair with the kitchen scissors. This wasn't easy, as he had the sort of fingers that struggled to pick up small change that had fallen on the floor. He ran up 4 sets of identical dresses on the sewing machine after he'd finished his cleaning shift at the hospital, using material he'd bought on special. Sewing a straight seam was hard for those fingers, but he wasn't one to shirk his duty. He taught himself how to knit and told the girls not to fret about the dropped stitches in their hats and scarves. He said when he'd mastered the technique, he'd teach them to knit for themselves. He polished their shoes every night until they gleamed, the way he learned in the army. He bought 6 hens and a rooster, so there would always be fresh eggs and meat. When the eggs hatched, the girls carried baby chicks in their pockets to keep them warm and gave them names and sang to them as they weeded the vegetable patch and vacuumed the house and did their homework. When all 4 girls turned up at school one day with black eyes and split lips, they said they'd walked into a door. The youngest said, no, it had nothing to do with refusing to eat the chicken he'd killed and roasted for dinner. She said, it had nothing to do with her saying the chickens had feelings and that they had 30 different vocalizations to communicate those feelings. She said, it had nothing to do with her sisters saying the chicken their father had roasted was the first one they'd seen climb out of his egg, and that they'd watched him grow his new feathers, and that he'd just learned to crow. The sad one.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is called A Game of Consequences. And that one is, I often think, terrible things can happen or good things can happen according to a coincidence in time. We can't actually determine, can't always determine our own fate. So this is a game of consequences. If she hadn't looked at her phone at the exact moment she was crossing the road, she would have crossed to the other side, entered the building, had her interview, impressed the panel with her verve and creativity, got the job, earned a good salary, bought an apartment in the city, traveled around the world for 3 weeks every year for the next decade, fallen in love with an Italian opera singer, broken up with him after discovering his numerous affairs. She'd have lived alone for several years, taken up painting as a hobby, started visiting art galleries, bought a dog, left her job, opened an art gallery, organized exhibitions for up-and-coming artists, married one of them, given birth to 2 daughters. The youngest would have died of a drug overdose at 15. The eldest, unable to bear the weight of her mother's grief, would have left home to live in a commune in Ecuador and drowned in the sea. The artist would have gone swimming in a riptide soon after. His beautiful paintings would be forgotten. In 5 years, no one would remember his name. But she did look at her phone. And because she didn't look up in time, she didn't see the truck hurtling towards her. So the paraplegic man gets the job she would have been offered, enabling him to live independently for the first time in his life. The Italian opera singer continues trying to find the perfect woman until he dies of a heart attack. The artist lives alone all his life, unencumbered by domestic responsibilities, and achieves international fame. He dies age 90, after which books are written about him, ensuring his immortality. The 2 children, of course, don't exist. The truck driver's delayed reactions because he'd taken a swig from the whiskey bottle he'd kept under a blanket on his passenger seat since his wife of 10 years had left him 3 months ago. In the act of replacing the bottle, he'd taken his eyes off the road a second or two before he saw the girl. If he'd been able to stop in time, he would have carried on driving for another 6 months, drinking on the job every day, until the time he was so drunk he forgot to fill the tank with petrol, and his truck stopped dead on a ray and imprisoned for 10 years. When he comes out, he trains as a drug and alcohol abuse counselor and saves the lives of 30 addicts. This is the age he'd been when he looked up to see a young woman dashing across the road, looking at her phone. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And if people want to learn more about you, I have the website and I can link that up certainly, but is there anywhere else you would point them to?
That's probably the best way. Yeah, the website.
Right.
Just put item, yes, because that's got all the publications and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks for that. And then I like to say it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. What I wanted to ask you here is, I think it's interesting with you talked about Flash and stuff, right? And that being kind of a fairly newer thing, right? I think some of those probably would have been prose poems back in the day or not, but it's really kind of developed more the last, 10-ish years. And then with all the other changes, right, to the literary scene, I know serialized fiction is starting to become a thing again, like it used to be, like in newspapers and such. But where do you see the future of written storytelling going?
I can't really see a change. I think people will always want to read books.
Sure.
So I can't really see that that's going to stop. A lot of people read books by Kindle now, don't they, on ebooks. I prefer them because I like the smell of books, the feel of the pages, the look of the books. But however people read them, bless you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So no, I can't see that it will it will disappear. I think people will always have that need to read something. Because by reading something, reading a piece of fiction, you can also learn something about your own life. Do you think? Have you found
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah. I often think that, the beauty with storytelling, and especially in the written form, is that it teaches us that we're important, that our experience is important. And then when you read it, you internalize that, right? Like those words come into your head and you imagine the things. It's very different than the screen. Right, the screen you see, Captain America, whatever it happens to be, right? That is out there. That is separate from you. You can have some feelings about it, and certainly it can evoke some emotions, but you don't internalize it the same way. So I think the written form is here to stay. I'm always just curious about how it morphs, right? And it's interesting because like they used to say with like radio. I remember probably 15-ish years ago, they're like, "Oh, radio's dead. No one's going to listen to the radio anymore." And that's true to some degree, but really, if radio is morphed into podcast, right? Like this, this will be on YouTube, it'll be podcast version, but podcasts are more popular than ever. And really, that's just what old radio used to be. You'd sit and, have a conversation with someone for, some amount of time. So it's interesting kind of seeing where writing's going, because there's AI, there's all these things. I don't think it's going to replace I don't think AI is actually going to ever replace writers per se, or like creatives per se, unless you're doing if you're doing the very boilerplate kind of Hallmark movie. I'm sure the robots can do a Hallmark movie and hit the beats. Not to belittle Hallmark, because God knows I watched them. I'd like to watch them when Christmas comes around, but it is very A, B, C, D, right? You just go through. But I'm always interested kind of what's next, right? Because it's going to change, because that's life. How does it morph? So, but I think your point's well taken. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it will. They used to think that Kindles were going to kill physical books, and then I think Kindles make up like 60% of purchased books or something. Last I heard, but it was kind of plateaued there. There are no more bookstores. I think Barnes and Noble's had one of their biggest years opening bookstores in the United States. I think it was last year. And independent bookstores have been doing well and starting to pop up more. So I think it's, and I think it'll just grow, but it's interesting to kind of figure out how that growth may go, So, but anywho, thank you so much for coming on the show and spending some time with us and reading your work. I'll certainly link everything up, so anyone watching, you can learn more and pick up a book. Anything else you'd like to pass along before we say adieu?
If people want to write, what they need to do is, first of all, read in different genres, not just one genre. If you're interested in flash fiction, don't just read flash fiction. Read novels, short stories, read nonfiction. And then try to put something down that means something to you personally. And leave your writing. Come back to it maybe in a few weeks. Read it out aloud to see if it makes sense, to see which words are redundant. Is there something else you can put in there to make it more concise? And keep doing that until you get to the stage where you're actually changing too much and you think, no, I don't want to change that. Leave it as it is. Leave it a bit longer. Polish it as much as you can, and then leave it, and then send it out to a publisher or a magazine. And to me, that's the only way to write, not using artificial intelligence to do it.
Okay, sure.
That's my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, amen. Thank you for that. Yeah, it does strike me as, why do you want to? I get it. I'll use artificial intelligence for researching things. It's pretty wonderful, actually. Like, you Google something, if you do that with one of the AI systems, it'll give you like a much better results that you can then kind of dig and use your imagination. The idea of just writing books with it just for the sake of writing them, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what the point is of that. But thank you for that. And thank you again, so much for coming on. It was a real delight to get to meet you and spend some time, getting to learn about you and New Zealand and everything. So thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been really lovely talking to you.
Yeah, also, yeah, it's been great. And then I'll get the show there. I will extra shots. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. It was a lovely time, as always, and we appreciate your time. So thanks so much for being here. I am going to leave you with a couple announcements. One is that I am really excited to announce, if you've heard on the show, I've been talking about my epic absurdist satire, Pirates of Appalachia, for some time. It truly is epic. It's going to be 2 books, and I'm going to be releasing those in all book forms, but also as a serial on Substack. So if you head over to Substack, I'll have the link perhaps on the screen, perhaps just in the description in the pinned comment. But if you head over there, you'll be able to follow along chapter by chapter. I will be releasing the whole book. If you want to sign up to support me, support the show, I am going to have some extra content on there. I actually always have all these notes in my work that go to my editor, so that if he thinks to change something, it says this is how it plays out later. This is where I did the research, whatever stupid little joke I make to myself. Mainly, I'll have on there. I'm going to have a lot of fun little bonus content on there as well. And I'm going to do a bunch of readings. So that will be on there for the paid customers. But if you want it free, you will get the whole thing free as well. Both books will be on there, and I'll have ordering links. Right now, they'll probably be pre-order. Depending on when you watch this, maybe it'll be the regular order, but you'll be able to get the entire book too if you want to skip ahead and read the whole thing and read it on your e-reader, read a paperback or a hardcover version. Whatever you would like. I'm trying to meet you where you are. I mean, you can meet me where I am, and that's the bar, usually, and predominantly Monday through Thursday. On the weekends, I drink at home. So, but if you would check that out, certainly I would really appreciate it. Also, we do have a member section on the YouTube if you'd like to go on there and get all the shows way early. And I'm going to start doing some monthly live streams for the members as well. Anyways, thanks so much for all your support, everybody. Cheers.